If I catch you peeking again, you're fired.
You can't fire me. I own this store.
The first thing Marcus Halle learned about grief was that it woke up earlier than he did. It rose before dawn, before the city's traffic hummed to life, before the sky committed to light or dark. It sat heavy on his chest as he strapped his shoes, as he locked his apartment door with one careful hand, while the other steadied a stroller holding everything he had left. Lila slept through it all. Peak Performance Gym glowed like a fish tank in the half-light, its floor-to-ceiling glass reflecting a man Marcus barely recognized anymore. Broad shoulders, permanent tension in his jaw, eyes older than 34 had any right to be. The regulars called the place the aquarium because you could see everything from the street. Sweat, strain, small triumphs, quiet failures. Marcus hated the name. Aquariums were for watching things trapped behind glass. He pushed through the door anyway. The front desk attendant gave him a familiar nod, no questions. No pity, Marcus appreciated that. He parked Lila's stroller near the stretching mats, angling it so she stayed out of traffic and in his line of sight. A small white noise machine clipped to the handle whispered softly, mimicking the sound of rain on a roof, something her mother used to play every night. Used to. Marcus inhaled, then exhaled with intent. This was why he came here. Not to build muscle or chase personal records, but to remember how to breathe when the world felt like it was collapsing inward. The gym gave him rules, structure, something that responded to effort with results. Lift the weight correctly and it rose. Missed the balance and it fell. Simple, honest. He started with mobility drills. Shoulders and hips loosening under controlled movements. He checked the stroller between sets. Lila slept on, a tiny fist tucked beneath her chin, her lashes dark against her cheeks. Every time he looked at her, something sharp twisted inside him, love braided tightly with fear. The world was suddenly full of edges. That was when he noticed the man in the red hoodie. At first it was nothing, just a glance. Marcus had grown used to people noticing the stroller. Babies were anomalies in places like this, soft, quiet contradictions to iron and sweat. He ignored it and moved on to light deadlifts, feeling his body warm, his mind settle. Another glance. Longer this time. Marcus straightened, hands still on the bar, eyes lifting just enough to catch the reflection in the glass. The man wasn't working out? He stood near the cable machines, pretending to scroll on his phone, gaze drifting back to the stroller like a compass needle pulled off north. Don't overreact, Marcus told himself. Hypervigilance was a side effect of loss, he knew that. Therapists had names for it. The world hadn't suddenly turned hostile just because tragedy had visited his doorstep, but instincts weren't theories. They lived deeper. Marcus finished his set and wiped his hands on a towel. He moved to the stretching area, positioning himself between the man and Lila without making it obvious. The hoodie shifted. The man took a step closer, head tilting as if trying to get a better look at the baby's face. Marcus felt it then, an unmistakable tightening in his chest, a low, animal certainty that something was off. He didn't shout. Didn't scowl. Anger made scenes, and scenes attracted attention. Marcus had learned that calm was more unsettling than rage if you used it correctly. When the man leaned in again, Marcus stepped forward smoothly, blocking the stroller with his body. His voice was quiet, measured, pitched low enough that it wouldn't carry. Peek again, Marcus said, meeting the man's eyes, and you're fired. The words landed strangely in the air. The man blinked. What? Marcus didn't raise his voice or elaborate. He just held the stare. Years ago, he'd managed teams, dealt with employees who tested boundaries, learned how authority didn't come from volume but certainty. The same skill applied here. The man flushed, color blooming up his neck. His mouth opened, then closed. He glanced around, suddenly aware of the mirrors, the glass, the possibility of being watched. Without another word, he stuffed his phone into his pocket and retreated toward the locker rooms. Marcus waited until the door swung shut before he moved. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the stroller, checking Lila's blanket, brushing a finger gently along her arm. She stirred but didn't wake. The white noise hummed on. You're okay, he told her silently. I've got you. He returned to his workout, though the rhythm felt altered now, sharper. Each rep carried a thread of tension. He scanned reflections, tracked movement. The gym noise, clanking plates, measured breathing, distant pop music felt louder, more intrusive. This was fatherhood, he realized. Not just the feedings and sleepless nights, but the constant calculation of risk. The understanding that safety wasn't passive. It was something you maintained, like muscle, through repetition and awareness. As he moved to the squat rack, an older woman from the regulars approached, keeping her voice low. "Everything okay?" she asked, nodding subtly toward the locker rooms. Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, thanks for checking." She gave Lila a soft smile before returning to her routine. The world, he reminded himself, wasn't only danger. It was also people who noticed, who cared enough to ask. By the time Marcus finished his workout, the sun had fully risen, light pouring through the glass walls and turning the aquarium into something warmer, almost alive. He packed up, shoulders sore, mind steadier than when he'd arrived. As he pushed the stroller toward the exit, he caught his reflection again. The man staring back was still tired, still grieving, but there was something else there now, too, resolve, purpose sharpened by responsibility. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent and relentless. Marcus adjusted his grip on the stroller and stepped into it anyway. Vigilance, he knew, was now part of love. And real love was worth every ounce of strength it demanded. The second rule Marcus Halle learned about fatherhood was this: the world does not change just because you ask it to. You can speak, you can warn, you can draw a line in clear, steady language. But some people will always test how real your words are by stepping just close enough to see whether you mean them. Marcus understood that on Monday morning when he returned to Peak Performance Gym and realized that boundaries, once drawn, did not end a problem. They only revealed who was willing to respect them. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the sidewalks washed clean and reflective. The city smelled like wet concrete and early coffee. Marcus pushed Lila's stroller through the glass doors at exactly 5:45, the same time he always did, habit anchoring him against the unpredictable weight of the world. Rita greeted him with a nod from behind the desk. "Morning, Marcus. Morning." He rolled the stroller into the corner near the stretching mats, parked it carefully, and bent down to tuck Leila's blanket beneath her chin. She was awake this time, eyes dark and curious, studying the ceiling as if it were a map of constellations only she could see. "You're early to the world today," he whispered. She responded with a tiny yawn, one hand opening and closing like she was testing the idea of reaching for something. Marcus checked the baby monitor, more out of habit than necessity, then turned toward the weight racks. The gym was busier than usual. A woman jogged on the treadmill closest to the windows. A pair of men worked through a circuit of lunges and kettlebell swings. Somewhere behind him, a radio played softly through a trainer's earbuds, the bass just audible beneath the mechanical hum of equipment. Marcus started with warm-up sets, letting his muscles remember the rhythm of movement, lift, lower, breathe. For the first 10 minutes, nothing felt wrong. Then, as he paused to wipe sweat from his forehead, he caught a reflection in the mirror that made his stomach tighten. Not Evan this time. A woman on the stationary bike had angled her phone downward, screen dark, camera lens facing outward. It could have been nothing. People checked messages between intervals, took selfies, recorded progress. But when her eyes flicked, not to Marcus, not to her reflection, but directly toward the stroller, something in his chest went cold. He didn't react immediately. He waited, watched. The woman pedaled slowly, eyes on her screen, the phone never quite rising to eye level. Each time Marcus shifted position, she subtly adjusted the angle of the device. His jaw tightened. "Don't assume," he told himself. "Don't create a threat where there isn't one." But fatherhood had rewired his instincts. The margin for doubt had narrowed. Lila was not a theory. She was a fragile, breathing fact in a world that did not know her name. Marcus finished his set and walked toward the stroller, positioning himself so that his body blocked the line between the phone and Lila. The woman's pedaling slowed. Her phone dropped to her lap. She looked up, startled, then away. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, eyes on her reflection in the mirror. When she did not raise the phone again, he returned to the rack. 5 minutes later, another presence replaced the first. A man with a camera bag crossed the floor, stopped beside the stroller, adjusted the strap on his shoulder, and glanced down. Once, twice, Marcus stepped toward him. The man looked up quickly. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to block your way." Marcus kept his tone neutral. "Can I help you with something?" The man hesitated. No, just, thought I left something over here." Marcus nodded. "There's nothing here that belongs to you." The man cleared his throat, slung the bag higher on his shoulder, and walked away. Marcus stood beside the stroller again, heart beating steadily, not fast, not slow, just firm. He wasn't angry, he was aware. That was the difference. By the time he returned to his workout, a familiar truth had settled in his bones. This wasn't about one person. It was about the way the world sometimes treated what it did not understand or respect. And the world did not understand that a baby was not a novelty. She was not scenery. She was not content. She was a life. The next morning, the pattern repeated, different faces, same behavior. A man paused too long by the stroller while pretending to stretch his calves. Two women whispered near the windows, glancing over their shoulders in a way that made Marcus's skin prickle. Each time Marcus intervened quietly, he moved closer, he met their eyes. He made himself present. Most people backed off, not one argued. Not yet, but Marcus felt the tension accumulating like pressure beneath a surface that had not yet cracked. On Wednesday, Evan returned. Marcus saw the red hoodie the moment he entered the gym. Evan stood near the dumbbell rack, earbuds in, head bobbing slightly to music only he could hear. For a second, Marcus hoped irrationally that the man had learned that he would keep his distance. Then Evan turned. His gaze locked onto the stroller, not casually, not accidentally, directly. Marcus felt the familiar tightening beneath his ribs. He finished his set before moving, control first. Reaction later. Evan took a step closer to the stroller. Marcus set the bar down and walked. "Hey," he said. Evan pulled one earbud free. "What?" Marcus stopped between Evan and the stroller. "You need to move away," Evan frowned. "Again with this?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "Again." "I'm not touching her," Evan snapped. "You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal." Marcus's voice remained steady. "I'm acting like her father," Evan scoffed. "You think everyone's out to get you?" "No," Marcus said. "I think some people don't understand boundaries until they're made uncomfortable." A trainer nearby slowed his stretching. A woman on the treadmill glanced over. The room had begun to listen. Evan stepped back half a pace, but his eyes stayed locked on Marcus. "You don't get to decide where I stand," Marcus met his gaze. "I do get to decide where you stand in relation to my child." Evan's jaw worked, his pride flaring. "This is ridiculous, maybe," Marcus said. "But it's not negotiable," Rita's voice cut through the air. "Everything okay over here?" She was already walking toward them, concern etched into her face. Evan threw up his hands. "He's harassing me." Marcus didn't point, didn't accuse. He simply said, "I asked him earlier not to come into my daughter's space. He keeps doing it." Rita looked from Evan to the stroller, then back to Evan. "I did ask you on Friday to keep your distance. I wasn't doing anything." Evan protested. Rita's tone was calm but firm. "I need you to move to the other side of the gym." For a moment, Marcus thought Evan might refuse. The silence stretched. Then Evan let out a sharp breath and backed away. "Fine, whatever." As he walked off, his shoulders tight with frustration, Marcus felt no relief. Only the weight of a truth he didn't want to acknowledge. Warnings only worked for people who respected them. He returned to the stroller. Lila stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then slowly finding his face. She made a small, questioning sound in the back of her throat. "I know," he whispered, lifting her. "I know." Her tiny body was warm against his chest. The world narrowed to her breath, her weight, the simple, profound reality that she existed and depended on him to be her shield. Around them, the gym resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted. The next day, the stairs were fewer. People noticed Marcus now. Not as the man who brought a baby into a gym, but as the man who did not hesitate to protect what was his. There was no hostility in their looks. If anything, there was something closer to respect. One of the trainers, a broad-shouldered man named Devin, approached him as Marcus packed up. "Hey," Devin said quietly. "If anyone gives you trouble again, let me know." We've got your back, Marcus nodded. Thanks. A woman with a toddler on her hip smiled at him as she passed. You're doing good, she said softly. Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't trying to be good, he was just trying to be enough. Friday came with heavy rain and low clouds that pressed against the city like a held breath. The gym windows streaked with water, blurring the world outside into a smear of gray. Marcus arrived later than usual. Layla had refused her bottle, crying until he paced the apartment for nearly 20 minutes. By the time she finally settled, he was already behind schedule. He parked the stroller in the corner, checked the monitor, and moved quickly to the racks. The gym was quieter than earlier in the week. Too quiet. He was halfway through his second set when his phone vibrated. The baby monitor, Lila, had moved. He turned toward the stroller and saw Evan. The red hoodie stood less than 2 feet away from it. This time, Evan wasn't just hovering. His hand was on the blanket. Lifting the edge, the world did not explode. It narrowed. Marcus lowered the bar to the floor with deliberate care. No clatter, no rush, every movement controlled, precise. Then he walked. Evan noticed him when Marcus was already close. Hey, we talked about this, Marcus said. Evan straightened. I wasn't doing anything. You were touching my daughter's blanket, Marcus replied. So? Evan snapped. I just wanted a better look. She's cute. Is that a crime? Marcus's voice was steady, but something deeper had hardened behind it. You don't get to decide what is harmless when it I send to your child? Evan's face flushed. You're paranoid. No, Marcus said. I'm responsible. You don't own this place. Evan shot back. Marcus held his gaze. No, but I own my boundary. The words seemed to echo in the air. Step away, Marcus said. For a heartbeat, Evan didn't move. Then Lila began to cry. Not loudly. Just the thin, uncertain sound of a baby who had woken alone in a strange place. The sound cut through everything. Marcus turned instantly, lifting her into his arms, pressing her small body against his chest. Her cry softened as she recognized him, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. I've got you, he murmured. In the mirror behind the dumbbells, Marcus saw the room. Rita at the front desk, already moving, Devon straightening from a stretch. 2 women near the windows watching, silent. And Evan, standing there, something unsettled flickering across his face. Rita arrived, breath tight. What's happening? Marcus didn't raise his voice, he didn't point. He stated the truth. I asked him twice to stay away from my daughter. He touched her blanket. Evan's mouth opened. I didn't touch her. Rita's eyes dropped to Layla's tear-wet lashes. Then back to Evan. Evan, she said gently, I need you to leave for today. Evan stared at her. You're kidding. I'm not. This is ridiculous, he snapped. I didn't do anything wrong. Rita didn't waver. We have a code of conduct. Respect members' boundaries. You've been warned. For a moment, it looked like he might argue. Then his gaze flicked around the room. No one defended him. Not one voice. Evan's shoulders sagged. Fine, he muttered. Whatever. He walked toward the exit, his footsteps loud in the quiet gym. The door chimed as it closed behind him. Silence hung in the air. Marcus held Lila, feeling her small breath slow against his chest. His heart still beat steadily, not in panic, not in rage. Just firm. Rita exhaled. Marcus? If he comes back again, he's banned. You did the right thing. Marcus nodded. Thank you. He packed up early that day. Outside, rain fell harder than before, soaking the sidewalk in silver. Marcus pushed the stroller beneath the awning and stood there for a moment, the city rushing past him in blurred streaks. His hands trembled now. Not with fear. With the delayed aftershock of adrenaline, of the reality that sometimes protection meant stepping into a moment others preferred to avoid. He looked down at Lila. She gazed back at him, wide-eyed and calm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. You're okay, he whispered. I've got you. As he turned toward the street, a truth settled deep within him. Fatherhood was no longer about comfort. It was about vigilance. About choosing clarity over silence even when it made the room uncomfortable. He pushed the stroller into the rain and walked forward. The third rule Marcus Halle learned about fatherhood was this. Calm is not weakness. It is a choice. And sometimes it is the most dangerous thing in the room. He understood that rule the night the message arrived on his phone. The apartment was quiet except for the soft ticking of the kitchen clock and the low hum of the refrigerator. Lila slept in her crib, one arm thrown above her head as if surrendering to dreams. Marcus stood at the sink, washing a bottle, his body moving on autopilot while his mind replayed the events of the morning. The gym, the red hoodie, the hand on the blanket. He hadn't raised his voice, he hadn't lost control. Yet his muscles still carried the echo of tension, like a storm that had passed without rain. The phone vibrated on the counter. He glanced at the screen, unknown number. For a moment he considered letting it go to voicemail, but something instinct perhaps made him wipe his hands on a towel and pick it up. "You embarrass me today." The words were flat, unadorned. Marcus stared at them, feeling a flicker of something in his chest. Not fear, not anger, just a weary recognition, he typed slowly. "I protected my child. Don't contact me again." The typing dots appeared almost immediately. "You think you're better than me?" Marcus did not respond. He locked the phone, set it face down on the counter, and returned to rinsing the bottle. The water ran warm over his hands, grounding him in the ordinary. The world could spin itself into whatever shapes it wanted. His responsibility did not change. Later, when he stood beside Lila's crib and watched her sleep, he whispered the promise he had made since the night her mother had been buried. "I'm here. I won't leave you alone in this." He believed it. The next morning, the city woke beneath a pale winter sun. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened as if remembering it. Marcus bundled Lila into her stroller and walked the familiar route to the gym, his breath fogging in the cold air. He did not know what he would find inside. Part of him hoped Evan would be gone, banned, finished, a chapter closed. Another part of him understood that people did not vanish simply because we wished them away. He pushed through the glass doors. The gym hummed with early activity. The same smells, the same sounds, the same mirrors reflecting bodies in motion. And there, near the front desk, stood Evan, no red hoodie today. He wore a gray jacket, hands shoved deep into his pockets, shoulders drawn inward. He looked smaller somehow, like a version of himself that had been left out in the cold too long. Rita was behind the desk, her eyes flicking between Marcus and Evan. When she saw Marcus enter, her expression tightened with a silent question. Marcus stopped just inside the doorway. For a heartbeat, the past week pressed in on him, the warnings, the boundary, the moment his daughter had cried. He felt the old instinct rise again, prepare, brace, defend. But something else followed close behind it. Calm, not the kind that numbed. The kind that chose. He rolled the stroller forward. Evan looked up, their eyes met. "I'm not here to start anything," Evan said quickly. Rita leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, Evan wanted to speak with you." "I told him that was only okay if you were comfortable." Marcus studied Evan's face. There was no challenge in it now. No defiance. Only something like uncertainty. "What do you want to say?" Marcus asked. Evan swallowed. I've been thinking about yesterday, about what you said. About boundaries." Marcus did not answer immediately. He moved the stroller to the familiar corner, locked the wheels, and turned back. He did not rush the moment. He did not let the room decide the tempo. "I'm listening," he said. Evan nodded once as if bracing himself. "I didn't mean any harm, I really didn't. I saw your kid and... I don't know. I just looked. I didn't think about how it felt from your side." Marcus crossed his arms, not defensively, but to anchor himself. Intent doesn't erase impact. Evan winced slightly, like the words had landed somewhere tender. "Yeah, I get that now." "Or I'm trying to." Rita watched quietly. Evan took a breath. "Rita said I can stay if I apologize." Marcus waited. Evan met his eyes. "I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic." There were no excuses attached. Just the word standing on its own. Marcus searched Evan's face for something false. He didn't see it. What he saw instead was a young man who had been confronted with himself and hadn't he liked what he found. "Thank you for saying that," Marcus replied. Evan's shoulders loosened a fraction. "But," Marcus continued, his voice still even, "my boundary doesn't change. My daughter is not for your curiosity. If you see her, you keep your distance. If you have a question, you ask me. That's it." Evan nodded. "I can do that." Marcus extended his hand. Evan hesitated, then took it. The handshake was brief, awkward, human. Rita let out a breath she had clearly been holding. All right. Let's all get back to our workouts. Marcus turned toward the stroller. Layla slept, unaware that a small conflict had just reshaped the morning. He began his routine, lift, lower, breathe, the rhythm returned. But this time, something was different. He was not just protecting, he was teaching. Over the next week, the gym felt changed, not dramatically. Not in any way that could be measured on a chart, but in the subtle ways that matter. People gave the stroller more space. Phones stayed in pockets when they passed. When someone wanted to look, they asked, "Is it okay if I say hi?" A woman asked one morning, smiling gently. Marcus nodded. Of course. Layla blinked at the stranger and then smiled, a gummy, wholehearted thing that made the woman laugh softly. Evan kept his distance. He still worked out near Marcus sometimes, but he no longer drifted toward the stroller. When their eyes met, he nodded politely and moved on. One morning, as Marcus packed up, Evan approached him. "Hey," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "I just wanted to say thanks for not blowing it up. For talking to me like I wasn't garbage." Marcus regarded him. "You're not garbage. You made a mistake." "There's a difference," Evan exhaled. "I'm trying to get better at noticing other people. Not just doing what I want. That's all anyone can do," Marcus replied. The words surprised him as he said them. They felt true. A few days later, Rita caught Marcus near the exit. "Hey," she said. "We're thinking about doing a short workshop next week. On boundaries, respectful conduct, stuff like that. Would you maybe say a few words?" Marcus blinked. "Me? You handled this with more grace than most people would have," Rita said. "I think it could help." His first instinct was to decline. He was not a speaker. He did not like being the center of attention. Then he thought of Lila, of the world she would grow into. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it." The morning of the workshop, the gym opened an hour early. About a dozen regulars gathered near the stretching mat, trainers, parents, a few of the younger crowd who usually showed up before dawn. Marcus stood at the front, hands in his pockets, heart steady but alert. He did not bring notes. He spoke from where he lived. "I'm not here as an expert," he began. I here as a dad who brings his kid into a place that wasn't built for kids." A few people smiled. "I don't expect the world to rearrange itself for us. I just expect respect for my daughter, for your kids, for each other." He paused, scanning the faces. "Sometimes we think the only way to protect what matters is to get loud, or scary, or aggressive, but that's not the only way. Calm can be firm. Clear can be kind. Boundaries don't have to be violence to be real." He thought of the words he had spoken in that first moment, the ones that had sounded almost like a joke. "Peek again and you're fired," he said softly. That wasn't about power. It was about clarity. About saying, "This is the line, no one interrupted." When someone crosses a line, you can draw it again without becoming what you're afraid of, Marcus continued. And if you're the one who gets called out, you can listen, you can change. That's strength too. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then someone began to clap. Not loudly, just enough. Evan stood near the back. When their eyes met, Evan nodded once. After the workshop, people lingered. A man with a teenage daughter thanked Marcus for speaking. A woman with a newborn asked how he balanced everything on his own. Marcus didn't have answers that felt profound. He just told them the truth. Some days were harder than others. He did what he could. He showed up. Weeks passed. Lila grew. She learned to grab the straps of her stroller, to babble at her reflection in the mirrors, to reach for Marcus's face with both hands as if trying to memorize it. The gym became something closer to a community. Not perfect, not immune to human mistakes, but more aware. One morning, as Marcus adjusted Lila's blanket, he noticed a young man nearby lift his phone, then stop. He glanced at Marcus, then lowered it again. The moment passed. Marcus felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride, not triumph. Just the sense that something small had shifted in the world. After his workout, as he packed up, Evan approached him again. "Hey," Evan said. "I started volunteering." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "Community center on Maple," Evan replied. "Kids sports. The coach said I'm good with drills. I want to be better with people. Marcus studied him, then nodded. That's a good place to practice, Evan smiled, small and genuine. Outside, the day was bright and cold. Marcus pushed the stroller along the sidewalk. Lila bundled against the wind. The city moved around them, cars, voices, footsteps, 1,000 lives intersecting for seconds at a time. He bent down, meeting his daughter's eyes. The world doesn't always listen to shouting, he whispered. Sometimes it listens to steady, Lila blinked, then smiled, as if she understood something older than words. Marcus straightened and kept walking. He did not know what challenges lay ahead. But he knew this. Calm had not made him weak. It had made him unmovable. And in a world that often mistook noise for strength, that might be the most powerful thing of all. The fourth rule Marcus Halle learned about fatherhood was not something anyone had taught him. It was not written in books or whispered by well-meaning strangers. It arrived quietly, shaped by months of small choices and ordinary mornings, by boundaries drawn and held, by calm offered in rooms that expected something louder. What you protect shapes what you become. Marcus understood that rule on a morning that felt like every other one. The city woke beneath a pale sun, winter thinning into something that might become spring. The sidewalks were damp from an overnight rain, reflecting the early light in long, silver ribbons. He pushed Lila's stroller down the familiar street, her breath puffing in tiny clouds against the plastic cover. She was heavier now, longer, her eyes tracked the world with growing curiosity, as if each passing face were a puzzle she was determined to solve. You're going to outgrow this thing before I'm ready, Marcus murmured, adjusting the strap. Lila responded with a soft sound, half giggle, half question. Peak Performance Gym rose ahead of them, glass walls catching the morning light. For a moment, Marcus saw it as he had the first day, an aquarium, a place where people moved and watched, where lines between observer and observed were thin. Then he saw it as it had become a community, not because it had changed overnight, but because people had chosen over and over again to treat one another with intention. Inside, the gym hummed with early energy. The front desk light glowed warm. Rita stood behind it, flipping through a clipboard. "Morning, Marcus," she said, smiling. "Morning." He parked the stroller in the now familiar corner of space that had become informally understood as the family spot. A few toys rested in a small basket someone had donated. A folded mat leaned against the wall. It wasn't official. It was better than that. It was cared for. Marcus knelt to adjust Layla's blanket. She reached for his face with both hands, fingers clumsy but determined. "Easy there," he laughed softly. "I'm not going anywhere." He stood and began his warm-up. Lift, lower, breathe. The rhythm was still there, but it no longer felt like survival. It felt like continuity, like something he could rely on in a world that rarely promised stability. As he moved through his sets, he noticed the small details. A woman paused to smile at Lila as she passed, then continued without lingering. A man lowered his phone when he saw the stroller. Devon, the trainer, glanced toward the corner once, a silent check-in, then returned to his client. These moments were not dramatic. They were deliberate, and they mattered. After his last set, Marcus wiped his hands and walked back to the stroller. Layla was awake, chewing thoughtfully on the edge of her blanket. She looked up when she sensed him, eyes bright. "Hey," he whispered. He lifted her, feeling the familiar weight of her against his chest. She nestled in, as if she knew this place as well as he did. For a moment, the past pressed close. He remembered standing in a hospital room 2 years earlier, holding a newborn while machines whispered the final truth of his wife's failing body. He remembered the way the world had narrowed to a single fragile life in his arms, and the way something inside him had hardened, not into bitterness, but into resolve. He had not known then how many lines he would be asked to draw. He only knew he would draw them. "Ready to go, kiddo?" he murmured. She answered with a babble that sounded suspiciously like agreement. At the front desk, Rita handed him a flyer. "Community Day at Peak Performance Families Welcome. We're doing a little event next month," she said. "Workshops, light classes, stuff for kids. You kind of inspired it," Marcus blinked. "I did?" She smiled. "You showed us what it looks like to make space without demanding the world change. We're just following your lead?" He studied the flyer, feeling something warm and unfamiliar in his chest. "Thank you," he said quietly. Outside, the morning had grown brighter. Marcus pushed the stroller down the sidewalk, Lila's small form bundled beneath the clear cover. The city bustled around them, indifferent and alive. He knew this would not always be easy. There would be other rooms, other strangers, other moments when the world would press too close to what he loved. But he also knew this. He was not walking alone anymore. Not in the way he once had. Later that day, after dropping Layla at daycare and finishing his shift at the water department, Marcus stopped by the community center on Maple Street. Evan had mentioned it before. Curiosity nudged him through the door. The center smelled faintly of disinfectant and old wood. Laughter echoed from a gymnasium down the hall. Marcus followed the sound. Inside, half a dozen kids chased a ball across the scuffed floor, sneakers squeaking, voices bright with the unfiltered joy of movement. At the far end, a man stood with a whistle around his neck, clapping encouragement. Evan. He noticed Marcus and froze for a second, surprise flickering across his face. Then he smiled. "Hey," he said, jogging over. "What are you doing here?" "Just checking it out," Marcus replied. "You said you were volunteering," Evan nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, it's not perfect. I mess up sometimes. But I'm trying." Marcus looked past him at the kids, at the way Evan knelt to tie a shoelace, at the way one boy leaned into him without hesitation. "You're doing good," Marcus said. Evan exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for weeks. "Thank you," he said. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the game resume. Evan spoke again, quieter. "You know, if you hadn't he said anything that first day, if you just yelled at me or tried to scare me, I'd think I would have listened. I would have just gotten defensive." Marcus considered that. "I didn't say what I said to change you," he replied. "I said it to protect my daughter," Evan nodded. "Yeah, but it changed me anyway." That night, back in his apartment, Marcus bathed Lila, warm water sloshing gently around her as she splashed with uncoordinated delight. A steam fogged the mirror, turning the small bathroom into a cocoon. "You're going to be trouble," he told her, smiling. She answered with a delighted squeal. Afterward, wrapped in a towel, she rested against his chest as he carried her to the nursery. He laid her in her crib, tucked the blanket around her, and sat beside her until her breathing deepened into sleep. The apartment grew quiet. Marcus sat alone in the dim light of the living room, the city's distant sounds filtering through the window. He thought about the path that had led him here, not just to this moment, but to the person he had become. He had not chosen to be a single father. He had not chosen the loss that reshaped his life. But he had chosen how he would respond to the world afterward, not with bitterness, not with fear, but with boundaries held in steady hands. In the weeks that followed, life continued in its ordinary, extraordinary way. Layla learned to sit up on her own, then to crawl. Then, one evening, to pull herself to standing using the edge of the couch, her face lit with wonder at her own accomplishment. Marcus clapped quietly, afraid that if he startled her, she might lose her balance. "You did it," he whispered. She wobbled, then dropped back onto her diaper with a soft thump, unbothered. At the gym, the family corner grew. Someone donated a small shelf of board books. Another member brought in a box of gently used toys. The space became a silent declaration. Children belong here too. Marcus never asked for it, he simply accepted it. One morning, as he finished his workout, a young man approached hesitantly. "Hey," the man said, "I saw what you did a while back. With that other guy, my sister, she has a baby. I didn't realize how easy it is for people to cross lines without meaning to. Just wanted to say, thanks for making it obvious." Marcus nodded. "You're welcome." The world did not change all at once. But it changed in inches, in choices, in pauses, in people deciding, quietly, to do better. Months later, on a warm morning that smelled faintly of rain and new leaves, Marcus pushed Lila's stroller down the familiar sidewalk once more. She was no longer a silent passenger. She pointed at passing cars, at dogs, at the bright colors of storefronts, narrating the world in her own language. At the gym, he parked the stroller, knelt to her level, and kissed her forehead. "Be right here," he said. She smiled, unafraid. As he lifted the bar for his first set, Marcus caught his reflection in the mirror. He looked steady, not invincible. Not untouched by loss, but anchored. He finished his workout and returned to the stroller. A woman nearby hesitated, then gestured gently. Is it okay if I say hi? Marcus smiled. Of course. The woman crouched a respectful distance away. Hello there. Lila studied her solemnly, then grinned. Something in Marcus's chest eased. This simple, ordinary moment was what all the lines had been for. Not conflict, connection. Outside, the city buzzed with the ongoing symphony of lives intersecting and diverging. Marcus pushed the stroller beneath a sky washed clean by morning rain. He bent down, his voice low, meant only for the small person who trusted him completely. The world doesn't always listen to shouting, he whispered. Sometimes it listens to steady. Layla blinked up at him, then reached for his face with both hands as if to hold the words there. Marcus straightened and walked on. He did not know what challenges awaited them. But he knew who he was now, a father who would draw the line. A man who would choose calm? A guardian of something fragile in a world that did not always notice its own strength. And in that knowing he found not fear, but peace. The fifth rule Marcus Halle learned about fatherhood came not from fear, not from confrontation, and not even from victory. It came from watching what remained after the tension faded. The line you draw today becomes the world your child will walk through tomorrow. Marcus did not realize that at first. He only knew that something had changed in him and around him since the morning he had spoken calmly into a moment that could have become something else. The city did not look different. The sidewalks were still cracked in familiar places. The traffic still sighed through intersections. The gym still gleamed behind its walls of glass like an aquarium where bodies moved and watched. But Marcus was different. And because he was different, the world answered him differently too. The morning light was pale and soft when Marcus stepped outside with Lila bundled in her stroller. Spring had finally taken hold. The air no longer bit at his skin. Instead, it carried the faint scent of damp earth and new leaves. Layla babbled at a passing bus, one hand waving as if she believed it might wave back. You're friendly with the whole city now, Marcus said quietly, smiling. The route to the gym had become ritual. He knew every uneven patch of sidewalk, every storefront that caught the morning sun just right. Each step was ordinary, and that was what made it precious. Inside Peak Performance, the day unfolded like so many before it. Rita greeted him from the desk. Morning, Marcus. Morning. The family corner was already occupied by another stroller, small, blue, unfamiliar. A young mother knelt beside it, tightening a strap. She looked up, a little unsure. Is this okay? I didn't know where else to put him, Marcus smiled. That's what this space is for. Relief crossed her face. Thank you. He parked Lila's stroller beside the other and bent down to adjust her blanket. She reached for the edge of the mat. Fingers exploring the texture as if the world were a puzzle she was determined to solve one surface at a time. He rose and began his warm-up, lift, lower, breathe. The rhythm was as familiar as his own heartbeat. From the corner of his eye, he saw something small that might once have gone unnoticed. A man walking past the stroller slowed, then stopped himself. He glanced at Marcus, met his eyes, and nodded before continuing on. No tension. No drama. Just awareness. That was what remained. That afternoon, Marcus sat on a low bench at the neighborhood park while Lila played in the grass. She had recently discovered that crawling could become something like running if she tried hard enough. Her version of running was a determined wobble punctuated by sudden collapses onto her hands and knees, followed by triumphant laughter. Careful, Marcus murmured automatically. She did not listen. Children rarely did. A few feet away, a man sat on the next bench scrolling through his phone. Every so often his gaze lifted not toward Leela, but toward Marcus. Not in suspicion, in something closer to recognition. You're the guy from the gym, right? The man said after a moment. Marcus looked up. Yeah, the man nodded. I saw what happened there a while back. With that other dude. Marcus waited. I've got a daughter too, the man continued. She's 5. Didn't you realize how much I let slide until I saw you draw the line like that? Made me think. Marcus studied him, then nodded. We all learn in pieces. The man smiled faintly. Just wanted to say thanks. When he walked away, Marcus sat in the quiet that followed, watching Layla pluck a dandelion from the grass with fierce concentration. He wondered how many small moments like this existed now, moments he would never see, but that were shaped by something he had done without realizing it could matter beyond the room where it happened. Weeks later, the gym hosted its first community day. Families filled the space in a way Marcus had never seen before. Strollers lined the walls. Children played on foam mats. Trainers demonstrated gentle exercises while parents watched with tired smiles. The glass walls that once made the gym feel like an aquarium now reflected something else entirely, a room alive with connection. Marcus stood near the family corner with Lila balanced on his hip. She stared wide-eyed at the movement, the colors, the unfamiliar faces. Rita approached, clipboard tucked under her arm. "I still can't believe how many people showed up," Marcus smiled. "You built something worth showing up for." She shook her head. "You did." He didn't argue. He didn't accept it either. He simply stood there, holding his daughter, letting the truth live quietly between them. Evan arrived later in the morning. Marcus noticed him before Evan noticed him. He no longer wore the restless tension he once carried. His shoulders were looser, his eyes steadier. He helped a group of kids line up for a relay, laughing when one of them tried to sprint before the signal. When their eyes met across the room, Evan lifted a hand in greeting. Marcus nodded back. After the activity ended, Evan approached. "Hey," he said. "You brought her," Marcus adjusted Lila on his hip. "She's part of the community now." Evan smiled at her, then took a respectful step back. "You know, I've been thinking about something you said, about how calm can be firm. I use that with the kids now. It actually works." Marcus watched a child dart past them, chasing a foam ball. "Kids respond to clarity," he said. "So do adults, most of the time." Evan hesitated, then spoke more quietly. "I was in a bad place back then. I didn't even know it. I was drifting, looking for something to push against. You didn't push back. You just held the line." Marcus met his eyes. "You chose what to do with it," Evan nodded. "Yeah, I did." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of laughter and movement filling the space. Before leaving, Evan looked at Lila again. "She's lucky," he said. Marcus answered without thinking. "So am I." That night, back in the apartment, Marcus sat on the floor of Lila's room as she played with a wooden block, turning it over and over as if each side might reveal a secret. The day had left him tired in a way that felt earned. He thought about how close he had once been to becoming someone else, someone sharper, louder, defined by defense instead of purpose. Grief had nearly shaped him into a man who reacted rather than chose. Fatherhood had done something different. It had taught him that protection was not about force. It was about presence, about being willing to stand in a moment and say, calmly, "This is the line, you will not cross it," not for pride. Not for control, but for love. Lila dropped the block and looked up at him. She said. The sound hit him like a held breath finally released. He crossed the floor in 2 steps and gathered her into his arms. "I'm here," he whispered into her hair. Always. Months passed. Layla learned to walk. Her first steps were unsteady and miraculous, each tiny movement a declaration of independence that left Marcus both proud and afraid. He hovered close, hands ready, heart in his throat, until she tumbled into his arms laughing. "You're brave," he told her. The gym remained part of their routine, but it no longer defined the story. It was simply one place among many where Marcus practiced the quiet work of being present. One morning, as he finished his workout, he noticed a young father standing uncertainly near the family corner, a stroller at his side. Marcus approached. "First time?" The man nodded. "Yeah, I didn't know if it was—" "Okay, it is," Marcus said gently. "You belong here too," relief softened the man's face. As Marcus walked away, he felt the echo of something deeper than satisfaction. This was how change lived. Not in speeches, not in headlines, but in one person making space for another. On a warm afternoon, Marcus took Lila to the same park where he had once spoken with the man on the bench. She toddled through the grass, chasing pigeons with delighted determination. Marcus followed a few steps behind, letting her explore but never too far. A group of children played near the swings. A woman sat beneath a tree reading, her baby asleep against her chest. The world moved in its ordinary, miraculous way. A sudden shout cut through the air. A boy had tripped near the concrete path, scraping his knee. He cried, sharp and startled. His mother rushed to him, lifting him, soothing him with practiced tenderness. Marcus felt the familiar instinct surge, the reflex to stand, to scan, to ensure nothing worse had happened. Then he saw that everything was already being handled. He exhaled. Layla looked back at him, confused by his sudden stillness. "Sometimes," he said softly, more to himself than to her, "the world knows what to do." She did not understand the words, but she seemed to understand the tone. She smiled and returned to her exploration. Marcus watched her, aware that one day he would no longer be able to follow quite so closely. One day she would walk into rooms without him, into classrooms, into friendships, into a world that would not always be gentle. He could not protect her from everything, but he could teach her what lines looked like. He could show her that strength did not have to be loud, that clarity could be kindness, that boundaries were not walls, they were invitations to respect. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft gold, Marcus carried Lila home on his hip. She leaned against him, tired from the day, her small hand gripping his shirt as if anchoring herself to something steady. In the quiet of their apartment, Marcus prepared dinner while she sat in her high chair, banging a spoon against the tray with joyful authority. "You're going to be unstoppable," he told her. She responded with a delighted squeal. After dinner, after bath time, after stories and whispered goodnights, Marcus stood alone in the dim light of the living room. The city hummed beyond the window, distant and alive. He thought about the man he had been before Layla, about the man he had become. He had not sought to change anything. He had only sought to protect what mattered. And somehow, that had been enough to shift the world in small but lasting ways. The memory returned to him with surprising clarity, the first time he had spoken the words that had begun it all. "Peek again and you're fired." They had not been clever. They had not been dramatic. They had simply been true. A boundary, spoken calmly, held without apology. That was what remained. The next morning, Marcus pushed Layla's stroller down the familiar street toward the gym. The air was bright and clean, carrying the promise of another ordinary day. At the corner, he paused for a moment, watching the city move around them. Layla looked up at him, eyes wide with trust. He bent down, his voice low and steady. "The world doesn't always listen to shouting," he said softly. "Sometimes it listens to steady." She reached for his face with both hands as if to hold the words there. Marcus straightened. And together they walked forward into the day, into a world that had not been remade by force, but gently reshaped by one man's calm and the quiet power of a line that held.